You're listening to Two Babies in a Business, a podcast about business, marketing, strategy growth, staff, clients, babies, marriage. I'm Christina. This is Peter. We're founders and leaders of CIPR Communications, and we are still talking websites.
And today we're going to be talking about the sexiest topic when it comes to websites ever, content. I say that laughingly, but super important topic, because obviously like content is everything in terms of your website. You can't actually build a website unless you actually know what the content's going to be first. And so back to maybe starting with process is we actually work on content way before we ever build a website. So that's, I guess, step one when it comes to content, because I want to build a website. Well, what do you want? What kind of website? What do you want on that website? Right. And like, that's really where the content conversation starts. And it's really sort of like, obviously from a process perspective, we build a bit of a sitemap in terms of framing out the content, in terms of generally how it's going to be laid out, what the pages are going to be. But then, it's like, okay, what are we going to talk about on those pages? And, are those SEO pages? Are the pages that we're going to want to optimize for SEO? Because all those questions that we ask up front are to understand really the long-term goal of the page and of the content. And so, if you're building website content, you need to follow certain rules in terms of like number of words. Minimum sort of 350 to 500 words on a page is pretty optimal kind of minimum amount to get any kind of SEO juice on a page, right? Calls to action. What are your calls to action? What do you want to have people do when they actually sort of read your content? Is your content there from an educational perspective? Is it a sales content? Is it top of funnel, middle of funnel, right? I mean, there's just a lot of questions around content and how to properly sort of structure content in order to actually have a website that's going to succeed for you.
Yeah, I mean, what I'll say too about content from the driver's seat is people really underestimate content and like how much content is actually needed, right? Like, I think like anything, I think we have a tendency to simplify things in life. And so, oh yeah, this will take 5 minutes, or this will be this, or this will be that. And, you think about a home page, like there are different sets of content on that page. And you think about a blog, like, okay, well, what's the intro paragraph on a blog page? And I think that's something that as we've evolved as an agency in terms of building websites, we've really honed our ability to understand what content and where. And yes, building that sitemap, but I think something else that's different that we do is actually a full-on content architecture, right? So that like blueprint to your content. Okay, it's an about page, but like, is it a landing page that's going to go to different sections about, one's about the team, one's about the board, one's about the values, or is it one page that, builds and tells a story and has a timeline? Or, we suss all this out in a workshop at the beginning, but then we go away as a team and start to really think strategically, to your point about the SEO piece, right? Like, yeah, maybe this section of about does need a whole separate page because that's going to help it rank better from an SEO perspective. Or no, actually, maybe there's a really neat way graphically or visually to tell this story on a website and help it come to life. And what I think is funny is often a client will say, yeah, content quick, like, well, we're super fast, we'll get it to you. And that's fine, but also you have to anticipate, the faster you can turn that around means the more time our team as the experts on web content get to sit with it and massage it. And okay, is it going to go here or there? Where does it make sense? Or instead of these words, can we use these words? And writing for the web is a whole other can of worms, right? Like, there's so much to consider in terms of how people read. Like, think about how you read a book versus how you read on a website. So those are all things we're considering. I think the other interesting thing from that content perspective is, as you sit down and think about your website, and as you add more people to that conversation, the content only expands. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but you want that content to have a holistic picture at the very beginning of the project not 3 months in, you're getting ready to launch something and a decision maker from a department comes in and goes, oh, well, you were supposed to have a whole page about this widget. Like this widget is like all the whole reason, and you didn't know, and now you're back to not square one, but maybe square three, and you were on square nine. So yeah, content is super important.
Yeah, you also want to like think about content from a flow perspective, right? So like think about search engines and sort of making sure your website has engagement happening on it. And so like, you want to sort of have levels of content on your website. You want to think about where to gate content. And so, I sort of shout out to Marty Greif from Site Tuners, but sort of, really probably you want to think about 3 levels on your website as a starting point in terms of like maybe sort of a high level in terms of like there's some high level information or the intro story, if you will, to your to the narrative, which is your company. And then, people will be able to then click in certain places to sort of choose their own adventure based on what they're interested in or what they want to know more about. And then, maybe in that, that first click, there's sort of a secondary level of content in terms of amount of information that they provide, so, and then maybe, then there's sort of a click more to really go deep, right? And so like, you don't want to be like, I think a mistake I see on a lot of homepages is just like everything written on a homepage, like just full of information. And it's like, whoa, too much, right? Some people just want a quick look, and that may be enough to satisfy them. That's really what the homepage is for. Get their interests, right? And then obviously clicking more, give them more, they click further. That's where, that person that's now clicked 3 times to go 3 levels into your website is probably somebody that's actually now bottom of the funnel kind of person looking for some detail, wants to know more, wants to learn more, wants to understand more, right? That's where you want to put that really kind of deeper content that's sort of more, and that's not, these are not hard and fast rules, but you do want to think about your website from an engagement perspective and clicking, and you want, you're going to get, your website has a lot of people clicking around on a lot of pages and moving around and reading different sections. That's really good for your SEO. That's really good for the, your digital marketing program. And so you want to think about structuring your content in a way that's also going to serve you from an SEO perspective, right? And serve your users. Think about your users. Think about when you go on a website. If you just go on a website and it's just super busy with all these words and all these logos, it's just, you're gone. Right. And so then what you're going to notice if you have a website that looks like that is your bounce rate is going to be very high because it's just like immediately overwhelming. And again, back to Marty Greif, he sort of says when somebody lands on a website, it's sort of fight or flight. They make an instant decision. Am I going to go deeper into this website or not? And so you really got to think about laying things out in a way that sort of eases somebody into your story, not sort of tells them the whole story right away.
Yeah, and I feel like that, some of that is what I think makes the content development portion of a website so difficult for people because, I think about our process internally, and Brad does a lot of our content writing for websites, and it's just a Word document or a spreadsheet, or sometimes it's a PowerPoint at the beginning with words and interviews and pulling from documents and writing for the web. And I think a lot of clients go, oh, but it's so hard, right? Like it's like when you think about that marketing brochure and in your mind it looks like something, but you're not really going to be certain of how you feel about it until you see it all laid out and you see the dynamic buttons that can be pressed or the parts that move or and so, it becomes so hard to visualize. And what I often end up telling clients is just put it down.
Yeah.
I'd rather go into development with, 20 pages of content and be removing things because things are, to your point, exactly that. Then going in and then coming out of the process with these really big sections that don't flow now because there's big blank spaces. And it's one of those situations where I always want to go in with more rather than less. And that's hard, right? Like, I think sometimes that really makes people feel stuck. And it's really like content writing for web. Yes, there's a craft to what the actual words are and how it flows, but it's also a bit of like throw the spaghetti at the wall from a content perspective and like, let's see what sticks based on your design. And then as you're going through internal edits, we talked through CAPR's process, right? So when we're seeing that first cut of a website come back from our development team, Karen and I are looking for that flow. You know what? This paragraph's too big. There's too much text here. How can we get rid of some of this? And we're massaging it before that client sees it. So, sometimes you end up overthinking too much in that stage. And to me, it's like, let's get as much down on paper as we can. Let's not overthink it. And let's be really iterative during the development process. Let's have too much to work with, right? Like, let's have too much supplies. Reminds me of me trying to make whipped cream for dessert last night. I didn't have enough, which caused some problems in the household.
If you had too much, I would have just eaten more.
Right. And so, having another, we should have just bought that other thing of whipped cream from Save On, and then we would have had enough, right? But having too much is never a bad thing when it comes to content on a website, because you can always cut down through development.
Yeah. And final note on content, maybe before we sign off for today, I think the advantage of working with an agency like ours is like we aren't in your business every day. And so just because something makes sense to you, like if it doesn't make sense to us, it probably isn't going to make sense to like other people that are going on your website, right? Like we're a bit of a filter for you in terms of like industry jargon and all these things. Like there's room for it sometimes, but most of the time there isn't. Like you got to assume that people coming onto your website, especially, as I talk about those layers on your website, their initial sort of interaction with your website, it's got to be sort of make sense. It's got to be super crystal clear. It's got to be, sort of not convoluted and simple, right? And so like an agency like us can really come in and sort of like help you simplify it, because we don't know your jargon and we don't know your sort of like your lingos and all the things you guys talk about in your companies. And so, I think some people actually look at that and like, oh, how can you talk about my business when you don't know anything about it? It's like, actually, I think that's a huge advantage when it comes to writing website content, because you should actually write your website as if like the people coming to it don't know anything about your business for the most part. And then again, there's deeper pages with more depth. Like if you're an engineer, let's say you're a manufacturing company, like there's places for really deep stuff that engineers are going to geek out on, like for sure. There's places for that on your website, but you got to think about where that belongs in the context of all your content, and an agency like ours can help you sort that out.
Yeah, I mean, you just recently did this for a client, right? You came in, they kind of thought of they just hired us on CAPR and under a communications and marketing retainer. And part of that is helping them reimagine their website a little bit. And, I thought it was interesting. I was in that meeting when they said, okay, well, tell us what you thought. And you were just like, well, I have any idea what you do.
I have no idea what your business is about.
And they all really stepped back, this leadership team, and went, oh. And what I love about our team at CAPR, and Brad makes fun of me a lot for saying this, but like we all represent a really different target audience and a different persona. And I mean, when we don't, we have an amazing network in WSI that can help us be that filter and look through that lens. But when you think of some of your clients, me as the mid-30s mom, we have our Gen Z, we have our Gen X, we have our the people that are interested in outdoors, we have our people that are interested in how things work in manufacturing, and we represent a big kind of widespread interests, but also most likely one of us will cover off what your target audience is. And that's why Brad and I made you look at this website, because you were definitely a target persona in terms of they wanted to hit a male audience from 30 to 50. And what did that look like? And what did they think about this? And so it was interesting to pull you in with that client, and you're obviously not involved in the day-to-day. And for them to hear from someone who they would want to invest in their product, going like, I don't even know what your product is.
I have no idea like what you guys do, right? It's like, so yeah, simplify, clarify, right? And again, I'm just sort of, we'll finish off with a.
I don't want to finish off with that, because I think we missed an important part of content, and that's visual content.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something that one is really important, the right visuals in the right spots, not just leveraging stock photography, but understanding where icons and graphics and video work, and again, like same thing we just said for the last 10 minutes about content, like applies to visual content too. And then the other piece of that is, you know, how many times have we sat there waiting for our website to launch because someone just wanted to find the perfect picture? And, you know, that reminder of like, hey, if this isn't a showstopper, like you could still launch.
Yeah.
You could still buy the house and put a coat of paint on it afterwards. And, you know, that picture shouldn't be a unicorn if you're selling chickens. But, you know, as long as it is a chicken and, you know, looks like a chicken and quacks like a chicken or barks like a chicken, you could use the picture and then replace it once you've had that professional photography.
Right.
So those visuals should evolve with you as well. And, you know, I think my drum that I often beat with clients is, okay, you don't have the perfect picture today, but you're going to get it. And like, it's still okay.
Yeah. And I guess we'll just end off with, like every other part of your website, your content is iterative and it can change, and that's okay. And don't worry about that, and don't like sort of get stuck. Don't let perfection get in the way of progress. And I think that's the number one thing we see in website development projects and content for websites is like people will get frozen and stuck because it's oh my god, all this content, well, it has to be perfect. And it's like, you know, it's like, let's get it together. Let's sort of iterate it. Let's have a couple eyes on it, make sure everybody has, you know, visibility to it. It'll get better over time. And by the time the website's ready to launch, it'll be, you know, perfect or near perfect. And then, you know, your business is going to change. So it's going to probably change at some point anyway. So don't worry too much about it, right? I mean, obviously it has to represent your business, but like, you know, again, it's an iterative thing, and it's not hard to change content, not hard to change a photo. It's great to add a video, like, and again, like, you know, and, you know, I'd love to add a whole bunch of videos to our website, but we don't have those videos yet. So like, we're not going to not have a website because we don't have the videos. Like, that's ridiculous, but we actually come across stuff like that all the time. So, you know, so it's like, hey, if you add videos next year, then that's okay, right? Like, you gotta, I always like to talk about marketing in terms of crawling, walking, and running. And obviously to me, I always say a website's like a crawl tactic in terms of like, you need a website. But you can actually like have a website that's a run tactic in terms of adding video, adding this, adding dynamic. I mean, there's so many ways you can make your website cool and this and that, but, you know, one step at a time, you know, get your website up first, because if you don't have a website up, it's not working for you.
There you go, content. I would say my warning for those listening, if you're a web developer or designer, has not mentioned content and you're already in stages where you're building mock-ups and you're talking design, you know, there's a red flag in that relationship for you, because your content needs to dictate what that website is looking like and what you're leveraging. So start with content always. And if your developer isn't, you pull them back and you tell them you want to start there.
Yeah, 100%. That's great advice.
All right, well, there we go. Another website episode done. You know where to find us, CIPR Comms, 1M on social media. And make sure you subscribe on iTunes and Spotify so you get notified when the next episode drops.
Thank you.